evening, everyone. Welcome back to Hardee and Steve Watch the English. It's episode 4, The Wounded Wolf. How are we doing tonight, Steve?
Very well, Hardee.
We have to let everyone know about the trigger warning.
Yeah, so this episode of the show has a genocide in it and a sexual assault. So if you're triggered by those, maybe skip the episode of the show and skip the episode of this podcast.
The episode starts off with the tagline 15 years ago, and it is with Thomas Trafford and two of his men. One is the bookkeeper David Melmont, and the other one is Finn Kelly, and they're on land in Wyoming. And at first it doesn't seem like there's a lot going on. There's a gentleman there with 4 donkeys? Mules. And not a lot happening, quiet. They seem to be purchasing the mules from the gentleman who does not trust them and wants to raise the price on them.
It's not he doesn't trust them, it's a shakedown. He's trying to extract more money.
And we do get some pushback by Melmont. And this is the first time we are introduced to Melmont. He turns out to be the biggest twist of this episode. But in this moment, he speaks with this Cockney accent. And what does he say to the seller of those mules?
Well, he basically says, I've prearranged for your wife to be killed if you don't run and hoist the flag. Deal. And that means sticking with the original deal. And Melmont is... It's kind of ambiguous whether he made that up or whether he's telling the truth. Anyway, the mule seller decides not to risk it and rides off. So Melmont is the ruthless, apparently hero saving Trafford's business interest. And at this point, we still think that Trafford is the big bad, and Melmont is a useful and apparently loyal underling, but we are about to find out that none of that is true.
No. David Melmont is more complex than that, and
and also apparently the big bad.
We find out that he has a propensity for violence, but that comes later. What happens is we come upon 3 military people, Corporal Jerome McClintock, and Trooper Timothy Flynn, and Trooper Billy Myers. The reason why their names are familiar, if you recall in the last episode, it was the Flynn and Myers farm that had the murder-suicide incident on. But in this episode, they're alive and looking to execute a Cheyenne Native American named Running Hawk, supposedly for killing Myers' brother. And at this point, Melmont shares that he knows where that Cheyenne camp is, and he wants to be a part of looking for Running Hawk. They say this when they have a military weapon that looks a little like a Gatling gun, right?
They have some kind of primitive machine gun. So by the math, the year is 1875. I think it said 1890 for the present in the show's main arc, and then it said 15 years earlier. So 1875, they have some type of primitive machine gun strapped to the horse.
And so Melmont says, I know where they are. Can you let me be a part of this? And they all smile kind of like in like this knowing way, like, yeah, you're one of us.
Yeah.
And so Melmont accompanies McClintock, Flynn, and Myers to the Cheyenne camp. We don't get to see this incident, but I'm glad we don't. It's in Chalk River. This is the Chalk River massacre event, and we just hear that Gatling gun going.
Pop, 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 very slowly.
And for a good amount of time.
Yeah.
And then they come on their horses smiling, victorious, carrying their trophies of whatnots. And Eli, our protagonist, also known as the Wounded Wolf, comes across them on his way back home. And he was told by his supervising officer that be on the lookout for those 3 men because they have gone AWOL and they're a lot of trouble, and just avoid them. And
or bring them in, maybe.
Do you think so?
Maybe. I think it was sort of, Whip, you can bring these guys in because you're very good, but Whip is saying, I'm mustering out, I'm going home. And the officer man is, oh, well, I guess that sucks. I can't order you about now.
I'm not sure what that incident is, or that interaction was. I can't recall. I just remember
it was pretty ambiguous.
The information was that there are those 3 wandering officers, and they're up to no good.
Yeah.
And Eli says to them, "It's none of my business." And they feel that is code for, he's not going to fight us. Let's just leave him alone. So Eli escapes that. However, then we are shown Lady Cornelia in her home being visited upon by David Melmont.
Yes.
And in this time, you can see there's some time that has passed since that Chalk River incident. And Melmont shares with Cornelia that it was Thomas Trafford that was a horrible man who joined in with the other 3, and he is now in a well, imprisoned, and he needs money to go and release Thomas Trafford. And Cornelia is very ambivalent about it, because she said, he had asked me to marry him, but we were not formally engaged. And the biggest thing is the loss of money, in which she convinced her father to finance the expedition in America that Thomas Trafford was on. And she bid him goodbye. She was going to see if she could make the money happen. And the next morning, though, she receives the letter that was sent by Thomas Trafford explaining that all the bad things that Melmont had been describing had been Melmont, not him. And she believes it to be true.
Yeah. And we're shown a bloody-faced Trafford who had been punched, I think, by McClintock on the ground with Slim, I forget his name.
Thin Kelly.
Thin Kelly. And Kelly is saying, look, we can't stop them. They'll just kill us too. Best we can do is go to the fort and say what we saw. And also we're told as Melmont, McClintock, Flynn, and Myers are moving past before they meet Eli, we're also told, oh yeah, we know we didn't get Running Hawk. We just killed that settlement anyway. So extra awfulness, and then there's this last lovely point of characterization of McClintock. If we didn't already find him horrible, we found that he is a Victorian social engineer, and he is willing to walk into the houses of the well-to-do.
You said McClintock.
Oh, sorry, Melmont. Melmont is a Victorian social engineer who will, put on a suit and walk in and, be very nicely spoken, but also walk right past servants like a nobleman. He makes a point early in the episode that he's not a noble, and no matter how well he does and how useful he is, he can never be admitted to the British upper class. But he knows how to manipulate their other tools, their other servants, and so he can, we repeatedly see him pushing past doormen and abusing the trust that comes with wearing a nice suit and mustache.
He was born in a poor social environment. However, he found his calling in the meat business. He started to get promotions because he was very good with numbers, and that's how he rose to the attention of the board of directors, who hired him to keep an eye on Thomas Trafford's actions and to prevent him from misuse of the funds. Except that Thomas Trafford was perfectly fine without David Melmont. Thomas Trafford had his ideas of what to do with the money, but he was not going to join in random murdering of people for no reason except for possibly some whatever reason he could find to join those people. So we have this mass murderer who is in a high societal environment when he meets Cornelia. And in some ways, because of the times, she cannot fight him in the way that if he had met her in the street on a dark night, she could possibly fight him. But because he is dressed in all the finery of a wealthy, upper-class English gentleman, he takes advantage of all those things, and he takes advantage of her. He takes her money.
This is the money she prepared based on his lies about Thomas. And she gets Thomas's letter and tells Melmont, I'm not going to give you this money. And of course there's the money in a bag on the table. But she says, I'm not going to give you this money. You lied to me.
Yeah. And he takes it anyway, and he also takes her.
Yeah. So we're shown after he walks out past the doorman that
Thankfully, this was off screen.
But then we see her lying on the floor in some pain.
And then we see at the end of the episode her pregnant and her getting ready to go to America. Even after she read Trafford's letter begging her to stay in England where she is safe. She was not safe, and she wants to go find the man who did this to her and her son.
Yeah, so we don't yet know how the son dies, how long, because this was 15 years ago, so how old did the son become before Melmont had him killed or killed him directly? At least that's implied. We are not watching ahead, right? We're recording this before we watch episode 5 and 6, and so we don't know exactly how we get from Melmont raped Cornelia and fathered a kid with her to the kid has been murdered and Cornelia is some years later making her way to America.
And she does open the first episode up with that line that you said, the man who killed my son was also his killer, or something like that.
Yeah, I'm looking for my son's father. He's also his killer. Or I'm looking for the son's killer. He's also his father.
Right. And so I had not remembered she said that, but Steve remembered and reminded me of those prescient words. And now we know, we really, really feel that the twist is that it is not Thomas Trafford who's the father as we thought. It is this David Melmont.
Yeah. So up front in the first episode and a half, we think, aha, there's a man, an Englishman in Wyoming, who we see him as kind of a horrible person beating up his farmhand. We know that Cornelia is going to Wyoming. We know that she was engaged with this man and that she had a son who was killed by his father. And so everything makes it look like Trafford is the father murderer.
I did not assume that he was a bad guy. I actually thought it was ambiguous. I didn't think that it was a farmhand. It wasn't his farmhand. I think that it was the person that was killing his cows, the babies.
I thought it was the person who was supposed to guard the cows.
No, I think it was one of the persons that they actually found killing the baby cow. And so that's, I don't know, I could be wrong. Yeah. But I didn't think it was someone that worked for him. I thought it was actually someone that they found who had done wrong. And then when he saw the Hereford Cross cow, he, went to the sheriff. And I thought that was all reasonable, actually. Like, somebody kills your cattle, you go to the sheriff and you say, well, why aren't you doing anything for me about this? I mean, the moment where I kind of started to think he might be a bad guy is when we see Flynn's wife go to him and say, I need you to return the unmarked cows back to me. They're my cows. And he said, well, you know the rule. The unmarked cows, they're mine now. Well,
they belong to the Cattlemen's Association, which sounds like a cartel. Mm-hmm. And then we're led to, well, why are they excluding this rancher from their cartel? They're kind of commercial jerks. But actually, there may be a very good reason to exclude Mr. Flynn and Mr. Myers from normal commercial society.
Agreed. And now I am convinced that this is the reason, and these are really good reasons to exclude them.
And there were all these hints, like many characters who knew them dismissed them as, oh, well, that's just Flynn, that's just Myers. Who wants to have anything to do with them?
Yeah. And then the episode ends, sadly, on Kills on Water. He's the Cheyenne person who has Eli captive, and he says, well, 15 years ago, that massacre, they were my family. So
he wants information.
Yeah.
Well, that's the end.
Yes. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, let's rate the episode. Are we rating these?
Oh, goodness. This one was really tough for me.
And it dragged in the middle. Like, it not only is it tough to get through, it was slow.
Yes. And I don't know if all the reveals were worth watching the entire episode, because all we did was meet bad people on top of bad people on top of bad people, and the good guys were barely in the episode. We hardly saw Cornelia, and when we did, she was not.
It was past Cornelia.
Yeah,
and we saw current Eli for less than a minute,
and held captive in a very sad situation. So our favorite characters were not featured much, and we got a bunch of sordid characters. So I give it 1 star for the information. But, I mean, if you can skip this and just read a synopsis of this.
Yeah, it's fine. I did not find the episode very entertaining. I think it's only a 6-part miniseries, but I think it could have been maybe a 3-hour movie.
Yeah, I think. Could have, could have been.
Yeah, I mean, maybe episodes 5 and 6 will have some exciting action that isn't quite so
dark. Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us this time, and we'll see you on the next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye.